There's nothing quite like family vacations, right? This is that time of the year where if you haven't had your family vacation yet, it's probably coming up pretty soon, right? For some reason, we all like to travel in the summertime. I don't really understand that because I hate summer, but it's hot, it's sweaty, and I'm fat. So I think fall is much nicer to travel in. But the Bogue family vacation was a tradition my entire life. And we went different places every year. One year we went to Flagstaff, Arizona. One year we went to Colorado City, Colorado. One year we did the traditional Disneyland. Everybody's got to do Disney at least once, I think. Otherwise, Disney doesn't get paid. And they need the money, clearly. But we did all these different vacations. The destination was always the variable, right? And as I grew up, I didn't really care where we went so much as what I could do around there, right? Mom would ask me every year as she was planning out our family vacations, hey, where do you want to go? And I would answer the same thing every year, someplace that has great tacos. I'm a pretty simple guy. But while the destination was always the variable, there was one constant that we could rely on every single year, and that was that it did not matter where the destination was, we were going to drive there. My father refused to go on airlines. He did not like going on planes. He's done it a handful of times in his entire life. And as a kid, I thought it was, maybe it's the cost of the thing, that maybe that's why Dad just didn't want to spend out that kind of money. That wasn't it at all. Turns out my dad's afraid. I like to remind him that he's afraid of something. He's also bald on his sideburns, so that's partly why I grew the beard. It's more to show off in front of him, right? But my dad would drive everywhere that we went, including, again, those very long trips to Colorado, the super long trip to Arizona. But most of the time, as Dad was driving, I just kind of hung out, right? Like I would read most of the time. I would just kind of chill out, veg out. I'd sleep large portions of that drive. I didn't think much about how we were getting where we were going. It wasn't until I started, and especially as I approached 16 and I was going to start driving myself, that I began to notice something about our family vacations. Dad never looked at a map. Not once did my father ever look at a map that I can recall as we were driving on these far-off destinations. And so as a small child, Dad knows everything. Right? I think every kid has that phase where absolutely everything. Adrian, plug your ears for this next part. It's not until we get older that we learn they don't know everything. Okay, you can unplug your ears now, sweetheart. Thanks. Just trying to maintain the illusion a little bit longer if I can. It wasn't until I got to be older that I finally started to question my dad as we started driving. Like as a kid, again, I didn't think much about it. Dad drove, he seemed to know where we were going, and I just relied on that information. But it wasn't older that I started to question my dad. Dad, are you sure this is the road we're supposed to be on? Dad, are you positive that this is the way to get to where we're going? I remember especially on that Arizona trip, at that point in time, I was significantly older in my life, and I was questioning him about every 10 minutes. And my dad finally got annoyed with my questioning and said, Brandon, I know Arizona is west, so as long as I keep going west, we'll be fine. But as I got older and stuff, I just began to question that my father's knowledge of knowing where we were going. He knew where the final destination would be. I didn't understand how he knew how to get there. This is before the days of GPS on our phones or MapQuest even or any of that stuff. And yet my father seemed to always know where we were going. And every time I would question him, he would tell me the same thing. Just trust me. I know where we're going. Trust is such a difficult thing for us as human beings, is it not? Especially when it comes to the notion of trusting an entirely other person. There are times I don't feel like I can trust myself. And so the idea of having to trust somebody else, well, that's nearly impossible. But especially as I may know where the destination is going to be, but I don't know how we're going to get there, that trust becomes very difficult for me. Every time we would hit road construction on those long trips, I would begin to waver in my trust of my father. But the one thing that was always constant, too, was we'd eventually wind up where we were going. No matter what it was that was going on along the path, no matter how dire it seemed, no matter how many detours we had to take along the way, we always wound up where we were supposed to. I just had to trust that Dad knew where we were going. I think Abram could have used a little bit more trust of God. We first talked about Abram last week. He's eventually going to be known as Abraham, hence why the name of the series is Abraham. But when we first find him in Genesis chapter 12, which is where we're still going to be today, so if you want to open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12, you can. But at this point in time, he is still called Abram. He hasn't made the name change just yet. And if you recall from last week, we got to talk about how Abram had no real knowledge of who God is. The verses beforehand don't give us any sort of background on this guy. We're just kind of plopped into the story when he's already 75 years old. Joshua chapter 24 verse 2, that Abraham likely did not know God before this first encounter, because Joshua 24 verse 2 says, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates, Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, and they served other gods." So last week, as we talked about this guy, when God showed up on the scene to talk to Abram, this is likely the ever thought about who this God could be. Right, we mentioned last week that before God shows up to talk to Abram, the last time that we know he spoke to a human being was Noah. And that we are several generations removed from Noah by the time we get to Abram. And so we marveled, or at least I marveled, I don't know if you did or not, about how when God tells Abram, a God he does not know, tells him, "Hey, pack up, go that way, and I'll tell you when to stop." He did that. I've read that story 1,000 times in my life, and it still blows my mind, right? If I showed up at your house and said, "Hey, grab your stuff, we're going somewhere," you're going to wonder where we're going, right? Abram was willing to follow this God he did not know. He was willing to this God that he did not know. He went there on the promise that God had made him, that if he's willing to follow after him, if he's willing to trust after him, that God is going to somehow make Abram and his entire family a blessing, not just for the people of his time period, but for the entire world. But that's all he's got is a promise. Promises can be broken. And yet Abram still did exactly. Such an incredible moment when we pick up the story in Genesis chapter 12, verses 6 and 7, we see a very significant moment of where God has taken him. He has followed the direction of God, and God seemingly picked him randomly. But when he gets to this particular destination in Genesis 12, verses 6 and 7, God shows up again to let Abram know something really important for his life. It says in Genesis 12, 6 and 7, Abram passed through the land to the place Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And so he built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him. Now think for just a second about what a significant moment this really is for Abram. Abram packed up. He left the only family that he had ever known his entire life. The only home he had ever known his entire life. Packed everything up and headed to this land on what could potentially be a shaky promise from a God that he does not know. And when he finally gets to the spot where God tells him to, God points out to him something, and it gives him a twofold promise. The promise that the land that he is currently standing, God is going to give to his family. That this is where his family is going to be taken care of for generations to come. That this is going to be their land. They're going to call this place home. Abram left the only home he knew and is now visibly seeing the place that his family will call generations to come. Promise that Abraham's offspring will get this land. Significant in and of itself, but I said this is a twofold promise. Because God is also letting Abraham know your offspring. Understand, Abraham was 7. God tells him this. I have absolutely no children whatsoever. 75, no kids. Now, in our culture, in our time period where we live out today, it is becoming more and more normal for couples to choose to not have children. That is a choice that you can make, and that's fine. Nobody's going to boo-hoo you, except maybe your mom, because she wants grandkids. But by and large, most people are not going to shame you because you've made the decision to not have children. But in Abram's time period, in the culture that Abram lived in, to not have children of your own, especially sons, but to have no children whatsoever, was a huge source of shame. To be heir to the wealth that Abram accumulates in his life. All of his stuff, he has nobody to pass that along to. More than that, he doesn't have anyone to share the wisdom and knowledge that he has accumulated over a lifetime. But possibly worst of all in that culture, there's no one there to share his name with the next generation. His legacy will end at him. There's no one to carry on the family name. There's no one in order to pass along the stories of his life. But now, the God who Abram trusted, that trusted so much that he was willing to pack up his entire life, has not just shown him this is going to be the land where your offspring is going to be. He's told you're going to have offspring. Your legacy is going to continue on beyond your life. An impact on the rest of the world throughout all of history. This is an incredible promise of God, and God has given him this promise as a fulfillment of Abram first trusting God in the first place. And if the story ended right there, that's a beautiful story, isn't it? Guy trusts God. God shows him what the future is going to be. He essentially shows him the destination before they get to it. All because he trusted in the midst of a random encounter. But if you flip ahead in your Bible, you're going to notice there's a lot more chapters that have got Abraham in them. And the next part, not nearly as cool or as neat as this particular section was. Because when we continue on the story in verse 10, we read, "And in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land." Now, there's nothing pleasant about a food shortage. I mean, I like food personally, so the idea of there being a food shortage, I've never had to deal with that problem before, right? But this creates a whole lot of other issues than beyond there's just no food. And the famine that came here was so severe that Abram felt that the only way, the best way for his family to be able to make it past this famine time was to actually go to a completely other country, to go into another land in the hopes of being able to wait out the famine taking place in this part of the world by going to a different part of the world. Now, here's the thing. Throughout history, not just recently, but throughout history, immigration has always been a unique problem for the world. It's always been an issue, but particularly in the time period that we are talking about right now. If you were to be a person going to a foreign country, just the sole presence of you being there and being a little different than everybody else around you would immediately cast suspicion on you. Most people would have nothing to do with you if you tried to address them in the crowd. Like if you're just trying to find out, hey, where's the best restaurant that I can go to? They'd probably ignore you. Pretend that you're not there. Even minor offenses of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could get you tossed out of the country. Even more than that, it could get you killed. Simply because you were different. But in Egypt is known as kind of a ruthless land. In this particular culture, in this particular time period, Egyptians were not exactly known for their kindness towards each other, let alone a foreign dude coming in on their soil trying to wait out a famine in his own land. And so Abram has plenty of things to be worried about this potential move to Egypt. But there's one more thing that Abram's worried about. One more thing that Abram is so concerned about that he feels the need to address it to his wife. We find it in verses 11. He's about to enter Egypt. He said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. So far, so good. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Over the years that we've been together, I have said some very flattering about my wife and the way that I see her and her appearance in my eyes. I don't think I've ever told her, babe, you're so beautiful that other dudes want to kill me so they can be with you. I might have to try that one, though. That's a pretty good line. Abram is so concerned about Sarai being so beautiful in appearance that the Egyptians are going to see her, they're going to be looking, and then they're going to naturally make the assumption that guy that she's with must be her husband. Hey, let's kill him, and maybe she'll want to be our wife. That's quite a leap, is it not? But this is actually a concern for Abram, that they're not exactly, again, known for their kindness towards each other, let alone strangers. And so the idea that, man, his wife is so attractive, we got to have her, let's get rid of this guy, it doesn't seem to be too far-fetched. He knows his wife is beautiful, and so he is worried about this particular thing that has to be an awfully beautiful woman, don't you think? And in fact, in my research for this particular sermon, I found out that not too long ago, scientists have developed an image for what they think Sarai must have looked like being that incredibly beautiful. And in fact, I got a picture of it right here. I'm trying to go win some brownie points here, everybody. I know she's not here right now, but I know she's watching online, so yeah. Hey, babe. But Abram has, let's call it a unique solution. Verse 13 says, say that you're my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life for your sake. He tells his wife, say you're my sister. I suppose that's a solution. It's a little icky, but it's a solution nonetheless, I suppose. And the part about this narrative that just kind of, rocks my brain a little bit, the part that I have trouble seeing past is not the idea that he thinks his wife is so beautiful that other guys are going to kill him. I think most guys feel that way about our wives. If we genuinely love them, we think that they're so beautiful that clearly other guys want to have them as their wife too, right? I still to this day have no idea what Mandy sees in me, but as long as she continues to see it, I'm going to cling to her like death. Right? Like we are in the middle of the water and she is the only life preserver. I'm grabbing that. So, wife, I think. Abram is so worried that they're going to kill him that he says, hey, pretend to be my sister. But the part I can't wrap my brain around is, it works. It actually plays out exactly the way that he was concerned. Because it says in verses 14 through 16, when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. Maybe Abram wasn't kidding when he told his wife, hey, you're that pretty. maybe that really is a good line here. Right? Because Sarai is so beautiful that when the people of Egypt see her for the first, they start raving about how pretty she is all the way up to the king. It gets all the way to Pharaoh. You got to see this girl. She is so pretty. Right? Guys, can we admit that? I know your wives are probably sitting next to you, but just give me a low key. That's what we do. I'm sorry. This girl is so pretty that it gets all the way up to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh is so moved by her beauty that he just basically backs a truck up to Abram's house full of stuff for a dowry and drops it on his lawn, giving him as much stuff as he possibly can in order to persuade Abram to allow Pharaoh the opportunity to marry who he believes is Abram's sister. This entire plan of how they were going to survive in this foreign land. And he's not just going to survive the famine of the land, he is going to thrive in the midst of it. Yeah, his wife is about to be the wife of someone who is far more powerful than him. But man, he just got paid for it. And if nobody's the wiser, what harm could it possibly cause? I read kind of a blog post or whatever about this particular narrative, and somebody who wrote that blog said this story really bothers them. Because he said, I'm married, and the idea of passing my wife off as my sister and giving her to another guy does not sit well with me. And I'm going to guess that for many of us in this room, it probably doesn't sit well with you either. Because God is the wiser. He knows the full situation. So God decides that he's going to do something about this particular problem. It says in verse 17, we see what he does about it. It says, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. That feels kind of steep, doesn't it? God is irritated with Abram's decision of passing his wife off as his sister and allowing her to marry Pharaoh, and so God afflicts Pharaoh's household? Why? All Pharaoh is doing is he's operating under the information that he's been given. As far as we handle the situation, he's handled everything correctly, right? He did what was culturally expected of him. He paid a dowry in order to marry this girl. Why is Pharaoh being afflicted by these diseases for what was Abram's mistake? Well, something about that particular moment, it enlightens Pharaoh as to what is really going on. We don't have any record of God showing up to Pharaoh and saying, hey man, here's the skinny. Instead, the afflicted house somehow awakened him to what's really going on behind the scenes, because verses 18 through 20, we read what's going to happen. It says, so Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now don't miss this part. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Now understand, Abram's little white lie here is not just affecting him. It has now affected Pharaoh, the most powerful man in Egypt, and Pharaoh's entire household. And because of that, because of Abram's lie of trying to get through this particular famine, of trying to survive, he's gone to Egypt in the hopes of surviving through this famine. Pharaoh just kicked him out. It's not just a banishment from the land. It is you're going to have to deal with this famine all on your own, bud. Pharaoh indicates to him that, hey, I wasn't going to do anything to hurt you. We wouldn't have let anything happen to you because she was your wife instead of your sister. You would have been fine. But because you lied to me, get out. And whatever happens to you, happens. Abram, in one moment, was thriving in the midst of a famine. In the next moment, he is having to face that famine head on. If Abram would have trusted that God was going to get him through the midst of all of this, that he would have protected him throughout Egypt, everything would have worked out just fine. Right? Every time we read this particular narrative, and I'm going to guess that at least for most of you, this is not the first time you've heard this story, but every time we do, it's easy for us to sit there and think, man, Abram, how can you go 1 minute from trusting God so much you pack up everything and move without knowing the destination to the next minute not trusting God to get you through this situation? It's easy for us to read through that and to wonder, why didn't Abram just trust God? But how often do we trust God? How often do we trust God in the midst of difficulties? When we face hardship, when we face the tough stuff that life loves to throw at us, how often do we actually trust God? Part of being a Christian, as being a follower of Jesus Christ, is that we know where the destination is. Right? Has nobody told you? So that's a whole other sermon, but I can do that. We know where the end destination is, but we don't know how we're going to get there. But how often do we trust the driver when life throws us detours? If you're anything like me, not real often. Understand, we carry with us an entire book filled with story after story after story of God proving that he can be trusted. Many of us in this room have had experience after experience in our life that have shown us God can be trusted. And yet when we face the next crisis, where's our trust? Abram had no idea what was going to happen to him in Egypt. He had no clue, none whatsoever. But remember what happened before the trip to Egypt. That God had showed up and told him, you're going to have offspring, and they are one day going to have this land. Now, I don't know everything. I know I look like it, but I don't. That was supposed to be a joke. Ray got it, at least. I don't know everything, but I do know that if you're going to have offspring, it typically means that you have to be alive to have said offspring. And still, Abram does not have an offspring. But God has told him he will. He's already shown him the destination. Had Abram have trusted that God is who he says he is, had he have trusted God the same way he did when we talked about last week? We haven't even gotten out of the same chapter yet. And had Abram been willing to trust him the way that he did a week ago, he would have been able to see God move in incredible ways. Would it have been scary? Sure, absolutely. When you don't know how you're going to get to the destination, it's always a little bit scary, isn't it? But had he have trusted the driver to get him to that destination, he would have been able to see God do incredible things. All he needed to do was allow God to guide him in the midst of it. Our problem is, our biggest problem is that when we face the things that hit us, when we face those opportunities in life where it likes to smack us upside the head, we assume that problem that we are now facing is so big, God can't deal with it. That was Abram's problem. That he viewed the ruthlessness and the way that the Egyptians treated foreigners in the first place. He felt that that was too big an obstacle for God to be able to move in the midst of it. And had he have simply trusted God along the path, he'd have been able to see God do incredible things. Our problem usually stems from the notion that we don't trust God first. One constant of life is that it is going to throw things at you. Right? I haven't met the person yet who is in their life, and if you were one of those people who could say, well, I've never had a bad thing happen in my life, it's coming. It's coming. All of us face difficulties in our lives, but when we learn to trust God first, knowing that He will get us to the destination He has already promised us, we're going to see Him things in our lives. There are so many situations in my life where the problem looked too big for even God to handle. And even in my lack of trusting God in the midst of all of that, guess what? He handled it better than I ever could have imagined. There are moments in my life where I can point to and say, I don't know how we got here. Look what God did. Understand, I'm not trying to minimize the pain that you may be feeling today. Life is a difficult struggle for each and every one of us. And yes, sometimes it is incredibly painful. I'm not trying to minimize that for you, and I'm not trying to call you foolish because you don't trust God, because if I call you foolish for not trusting God, I have to call myself foolish for not trusting God. Just this week, when that email went out to all of you, I didn't trust God. It got me very angry. You have to work really hard to get me angry. This guy did it in an email. But guess what? God still got us through it. And God is still going to get you through that, no matter how big, how scary, how unknown the future is to you. Trust the driver. He hasn't let you down yet, has he? It may not work out the way that you planned it to, but most of the time, if we can really be honest in our hindsight, it tends to work out better. First, we get to see God do incredible things. He is constant. He is unchanging. He is trustworthy. He has shown that over and over again because He is the same God who followed through on His promise to Abram. He is the same God that followed through on His promise that He made in Genesis chapter 3, that He would send someone to make right the relationship between God and man, and He did so with His own Son. He has proven Himself trustworthy over and over and over again in my own life, and I know He will do the same for you. But that's easy to say right now. When those storms hit, when life throws those things at you, do everything in your power to trust first. The prophet Jeremiah would write in Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8, and we'll close with it. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is in the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit.